There is a moment that happens right before you leave the house, and it is so small most people never name it. You are standing by the door, keys in your hand, shoes already on, and something in you pauses. Not fear. Not laziness. Not even doubt, exactly. Just a quiet resistance, like your body is asking a question your mind did not think to ask. And you barely notice it. You only notice the heaviness that follows, the slight irritation, the sense that leaving is somehow more complicated than it should be. Then someone cancels. And the relief hits so fast it feels physical. You do not even have time to pretend you are disappointed. You might still like them. You might even miss them sometimes. But that relief is real. And it is oddly specific. It is almost embarrassing how good it feels to have your night back. Most people assume that reaction means something obvious. That you are introverted, drained, antisocial, tired. But the strange part is how automatic it is. Like the relief was waiting for you before you even made the plan. And once you notice it, you start seeing it everywhere. You can spend all day thinking about going out, then the moment you actually could, you suddenly do not want to. You can enjoy people, and still feel like you are counting down until you can be alone again. Not because the night was bad. Because something in you relaxes when it ends. Psychology reveals that humans are always tracking safety, even when they believe they are relaxed. And for some people, the outside world is not dangerous, but it is demanding in a way that is hard to describe. Not loud like traffic. Loud like constant adjustment. You walk into a coffee shop and your brain starts reading the room without asking permission. Where do I stand? Where do I look? How long do I wait before checking my phone? Do I seem awkward right now? It is small. But it is constant. And it creates a pressure that feels normal if you have lived with it long enough. So you do not call it anxiety. You just call it being tired. And then you get home. And something changes. Your shoulders drop. Your face relaxes. Your mind stops scanning. It is not even a thought. It is a physical shift, like your body finally believes it can stop performing. That is why some people do not just enjoy staying home. They feel more like themselves at home. Not in a cozy way. In a psychological way. At home, you are not being read. No one is tracking your tone or your expression. No one is misunderstanding your silence. And you might not realize how much energy you spend managing those things until you are somewhere you do not have to. Even a grocery store can be exhausting. Not because it is hard. Because you are absorbing micro-signals. People walking too close. Someone reaching past you. A cashier looking at you a second too long. The decision of whether to smile. It is nothing. And yet it adds up. And if you are sensitive to emotional triggers, you can feel that accumulation before you can explain it. Then you get home and the silence feels like medicine. But there is a contradiction hidden inside that comfort. Because staying home is not always about peace. Sometimes it is about control. Outside, the world interrupts you constantly. Noise, people, expectations, schedules. Inside, everything slows down. You can eat when you want. You can speak or not speak. You can change your mind without explaining it. Your decisions feel like they belong to you again. And that simplicity feels like freedom. It is why some people can go out, have a perfectly fine time, and still feel relieved when they return. It is not that they hated the night. It is that the whole time, part of their brain was slightly tense. Like they were borrowing someone else's rhythm. And when they get home, their body returns to its own pace. Being around others, even people you like, comes with subtle demands. To be responsive. To react correctly. To not be too quiet. To not be too intense. And most people do not notice they are doing this. They just feel drained afterward. They assume it is social. Battery. But sometimes it is deeper. Sometimes it is the exhaustion of editing yourself. If you grew up in an environment where being misunderstood had consequences, you learned to monitor yourself early. You learned to scan facial expressions. You learned to adjust your tone. And if you do that long enough, it becomes automatic. A cognitive pattern. You stop noticing it as effort. You just feel tired. So you start preferring home. Because home is the only place where you can be unfinished. You can be quiet without being asked what is wrong. You can be tired without apologizing. You can exist without having to prove you are okay. That kind of permission is rare. And it is why canceled plans feel so good. It is not just time you are getting back. It is the removal of the need to be perceived. And once you see that, the preference for staying home starts to feel less like personality. More like a pattern you have been living inside for years without naming it. There is a certain kind of awareness that develops in people who spend a lot of time alone. Not intellectual awareness. Emotional awareness. When you stay home, you start noticing how your mood changes based on small things. You notice which conversations leave you restless. You notice which people drain you even when they are kind. You notice how certain texts create tension before you even open them. Most people do not notice these things because their life is too full of noise. But when the noise disappears, you can actually hear yourself. And that sounds peaceful, but it is also uncomfortable. Because when you are alone long enough, you stop having to negotiate. You stop having to compromise your rhythm. And that can feel like freedom. But it can also make the outside world feel heavier every time you return to it. Not because it changed. Because your tolerance for friction got smaller. At home, everything is predictable. The lighting, the temperature, the sounds. Even boredom feels familiar. Outside, anything can happen. Someone can misread your tone. Someone can pull you into a conversation you did not want. Someone can make you feel like you have to explain yourself. And if your nervous system is sensitive, unpredictability becomes exhausting. So you choose home again. And each time you choose it, your brain learns something. It learns that avoidance works. It learns that relief is immediate. It learns that staying in dissolves tension faster than facing whatever the tension came from. This is how a preference quietly becomes a coping strategy. And it happens without drama. You are not falling apart. You are just staying in. Ordering food. Watching something familiar. Enjoying your peace. But the relief starts to feel like a reward. And rewards shape behavior. The brain does not care if something is good for your long-term life. It cares if it reduces discomfort right now. So if going out creates discomfort, and staying home dissolves it, your brain will quietly push you towards staying home again and again. Eventually you call it your personality. I just like being home. But sometimes that statement is not describing what you like. It is describing what you have learned to protect. Some people who love staying home do not trust happiness that depends on other people. They do not trust plans. They do not trust connection that requires constant effort. So they build a life that is harder to disrupt. A life where solitude is the baseline. If you do not need anyone, you cannot be let down. If you do not go out, you cannot be rejected. It is not conscious most of the time. It is just a pattern that quietly shapes your decision-making. And it is hard to admit, because it reframes everything. It makes staying home feel less like preference and more like protection. But it is complicated, because not everyone is hiding. Some people stay home because their inner world is genuinely rich. They can sit in silence without panic. They can spend hours thinking, reading, creating. The outside world feels less interesting than their own mind. Still, even then, there is a contradiction. Staying home can make time disappear. Days blend together. You stop being surprised. You stop being forced into the present. At home, you can rehearse everything. You can pause. You can replay conversations. You can imagine futures. You can build entire emotional worlds without exposing them to anyone. And that mental freedom can feel addictive. Because real life is messy. Real life does not let you stop and edit. So you stay home, where your mind has control. And control feels like safety. Until it starts to feel like isolation. I have caught myself in this. Thinking I was choosing peace, when I was also avoiding uncertainty. Telling myself I liked calm, when part of what I liked was not being disappointed. Not having to wonder if someone wanted me there. Not having to read between lines. And it made me rethink the whole idea of being independent. Because sometimes independence is not strength. Sometimes it is fatigue. Sometimes it is a person who got tired of emotional guesswork. And once you see that, you start noticing how often staying home is less about the house itself. More about what the house represents. A space where you are not being evaluated. A space where your silence is not interpreted as attitude. A space where you can exist without having to prove you are okay. And maybe that is why the relief of cancelled plans feels so strong. It is not just time you are getting back. It is the removal of the need to be perceived. That is a powerful thing. Because being perceived means being shaped. Even by people you like. You soften your opinions. You adjust your energy. You laugh when you do not fully feel it. And none of that is evil. It is just social life. But if you are the kind of person who notices yourself doing it, it starts to feel like a quiet betrayal. So you return to the only place where you do not have to split yourself into pieces. And then one day you notice the moment again. Keys in your hand. Shoes already on. That tiny pause before you leave. It is not laziness. It is your mind checking the price of being seen. And you might still go out. Or you might stay in. But now you will feel the decision happening inside you. You will notice the negotiation. And that awareness changes the moment, even if nothing else changes. Because once you notice that pause at the door, it stops being invisible. And it becomes something you recognize. Not as a flaw. Not as a trait. Just as a signal your mind has been sending you for a long time.